HTTPS was invented by Netscape as a improvement or an upgrade to HTTP. I think they probably thought the most immediate purpose was to protect people's credit card numbers so that hackers couldn't sniff your credit card numbers from your TCP/IP connections and spend your money. It was, in truth, as a radical history-making shift in the balance of power between individuals and large centralized organizations, especially governments. It was the first time that strong cryptography was deployed to the masses, to the populace, to everyone, instead of just being available to like generals and presidents and whatever.
I talk about privacy as a set of trade-offs. Everything around privacy is really about, what am I willing to give or what am I willing to get? And so I talk about it in the sense of, if you want complete and total privacy, then you're limiting a whole bunch of things and a whole bunch of conveniences that lots of people want. So just as a really, really basic example, like going to the grocery store to buy stuff involves giving up some level of privacy. And for most people, there's a trade-off there that is completely worth it. Right now, we're giving data to, say, Facebook or Google or whoever, and we're saying we're getting something back out of it. Search, the ability to communicate with friends. And for a lot of people, they're saying, well, I think it's worth it. But where people get uncomfortable, and this is where the privacy issue sort of comes up, is we don't quite know what the trade-off is, right? When I gave the grocery store example, like we know what the trade-off is. There are a couple people who are going to see, the hot dogs that I put into my shopping cart or whatever. That's fine with me. I don't care. But, with Facebook or Google, they're collecting a whole bunch of data, but I don't know exactly what that data is. And I don't know exactly what it is they're doing with it. I know kind of what I get back, and I feel like that's valuable, but the uncomfortableness and the sort of privacy concerns that come up with are the uncomfortable feeling of, I don't know how much I'm paying for that benefit that I'm getting, and I don't know what the long-term impact is. So I don't know what the trade-off is.
We are losing increasingly financial privacy that we have and that we take for granted whenever we go to the supermarket and just use cash to buy something. Not only does a debit card or a credit card know, where you are engaging in your transaction, but they have like this moment in time where it was like, you are at this exact spot at this exact moment. And it's creating not only a history of transactions, but a history of your location over time, which is incredibly sensitive. And that information can be sought by law enforcement in the future. It can be sought in a child custody battle or in a divorce proceeding. Who knows what it's going to be used for? And we shouldn't even have to wonder. We should be able to have a default amount of privacy whenever we engage in the world, if we choose to, right? We should be able to not leave little digital crumbs of our existence constantly.
We've again been taught that access means letting go of your data. If you want to access this, you better accept these T's and C's that probably have 10,000 things that will violate your privacy. But it doesn't have to be like that, right? Access is not, you don't have to pay the toll to get access, right? And that toll right now is, here's everything about me at all times. So I think it's just really reclaiming a lot of the power that we have just constantly been leeching, our personal power that we've just permanently been leeching to organizations, to governments, to anybody and everybody.
I think the problem that existed with Web 2 was that it was so focused on the idea of creating network effects and network growth that privacy was essentially an afterthought. It was a remedial step to deal with like problems that emerged. And actually Web 3 is really, if you think about it at its core, because Web 3's primitives are cryptography, then we have a chance to make privacy actually the very first thing that we address. That we can actually secure things like authenticity. We can secure identity. We can secure information first, and then broadcast it out in a responsible way. So theoretically, The decentralized web actually has more tools than most to achieve proper levels of privacy. What is required is a decision by the leaders and the engineers and the end users that are engaging with this technology to prioritize privacy and take this opportunity that is actually embedded within the technology.
If we're going to rethink how we build the web, then let's try to build in designs that respect user control of data, that respect people's privacy. And so, like, you'll often see that cryptography and like proofs and hashing and all of these like sort of a little bit scary mathematical terms are used and just to describe how you interact with data and how you interact with services and things on the decentralized web. And the reason for that is because we're trying to bake into the protocols of the decentralized web safer ways to communicate and interact on the web. So if my data is protected with an encryption key, and some of the scary math behind that can be simplified and made available to me without me explicitly having to deal with it, that's a win for everybody. Because I can be certain that I'm exchanging data with people that I know and trust, and that they can validate and ensure that the data that they're getting from me, they know and trust. But it's, similarly, anyone who happens to be trying to snoop in on our conversation doesn't have access to that information. And you start to essentially bake in the values that we have into the protocols that we use to communicate. Then it's a lot safer. You can start to like communicate in a way that you would naturally want to as a human who communicates. And this conversation between you and I is private. This conversation between me and my community is open. And all of these things are made very explicit. You can trust that it's verifiable, that it's cryptographically secure, and that really opens things up. You can do so much more when you don't need to worry about that stuff.
We have, by default, in a society, a sort of border between what the state and what other people can see and control. We have to start thinking about technology as an extension of ourselves, that we have to realize that a lot of the things that we share with our devices aren't conversations with the outside world. They're certainly not public, but they're not even, the privacy of a conversation. They're the things they're the things that help me think. They're the things that it's the conversation I'm having with myself, the things that define who I am. And I think everyone is beginning to realize that the perimeter between where you should be fully autonomous and fully private wraps around our own devices.